The late August sun hung low over Maplewood, Oregon, casting golden streaks across the quiet coastal town. Its streets lined with cedar trees and small shops hummed with the gentle rhythm of a place where everyone knew each other's names. At the edge of Maplewood Community College's campus, a weathered bulletin board stood under an old oak, its surface cluttered with flyers for study groups, bake sales, and part-time jobs. Among them, a torn piece of paper pinned crookedly caught the eye of Sarah Bennett. The note, written in careful slanted handwriting, read, "Room for rent. Cedar Lane. Quiet neighborhood. Affordable. Call Daniel Harper." No one passing by that warm morning could have guessed the chain of events this simple notice would spark, least of all Sarah, who paused, her fingers brushing the faded ink. Sarah, 21, was a junior at the college, but she wasn't like the other students. Her classmates, with their backpacks slung carelessly over one shoulder, often laughed at such postings, joking that only desperate students lived in cramped, quirky houses like the ones on Cedar Lane. Yet Sarah's hazel eyes lingered on the words with a quiet intensity, as if they held a promise she hadn't yet named. She felt a tug in her chest, a whisper of something she'd been chasing since she left Seattle 3 months ago. Back there, she was Sarah Bennett, daughter of Edward Bennett, a tech mogul whose name adorned skyscrapers and charity galas. Here in Maplewood, she was just Sarah, a student in jeans and a faded sweater, her dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail, her past locked away like a secret she wasn't ready to share. Seattle had been a world of polished marble floors, chauffeurs, and expectations that weighed heavier than the designer bags her father insisted she carry. Sarah had grown up in a mansion where staff moved silently, where her father's voice echoed with authority, and where her own desires seemed to vanish under the pressure to be the perfect heiress. She'd enrolled at Maplewood Community College against her father's wishes, trading luxury for a dorm room and anonymity. But the dorms, loud with late-night parties and thin walls, felt like another cage. She wanted something real, something that didn't gleam with polish or pretense. That's when she saw the notice, its simplicity calling to her like a beacon. Sarah pulled out her phone, not the sleek custom model her father had given her, but an older one she'd bought to blend in, and dialed the number. The line rang twice before a deep, cautious voice answered. "Hello?" it said, tinged with fatigue. "Hi, I saw your notice on the college board," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "Is the room still available?" There was a pause long enough to make her wonder if she'd misdialed. Then a quieter reply. "Yes, you can come by today if you'd like. 124 Cedar Lane." The call ended abruptly, leaving Sarah staring at her phone, her heart racing with a mix of nerves and excitement. Cedar Lane was a narrow street at the edge of Maplewood, tucked between rows of modest homes and overgrown hedges. The Harper house stood at the far end, a 2-story cottage with peeling blue paint and a sagging porch. It looked lived-in warm, despite its wear, with a tricycle tipped over in the front yard and a faded welcome mat at the door. Sarah hesitated, her suitcase in hand, her sneakers crunching on the gravel path. This was unfamiliar ground. She was used to gated estates, security systems, and drivers who opened doors for her. Here the air smelled of salt from the nearby Pacific and pine from the surrounding woods. She took a deep breath and knocked. The door creaked open, revealing Daniel Harper. He was 40, with dark blonde hair streaked with gray, his flannel shirt rolled up to the elbows revealing calloused hands that spoke of years spent under the hood of cars. His blue eyes, tired but kind, sized her up not with judgment, but with the careful scrutiny of a man who'd learned to protect what mattered most. "You're Sarah?" he asked, his voice low but warm. She nodded, offering a small smile. Before he could say more, a small figure darted from behind him, A boy, about 10, with messy brown hair and bright green eyes clutching a toy spaceship. "Is she gonna live here, Dad?" the boy asked, his voice loud with curiosity. Daniel's lips twitched, almost a smile. "This is Liam, my son. He's around a lot." Sarah crouched to Liam's level, her smile widening. "Hi, Liam. I'm Sarah. That's a cool spaceship." Liam studied her, then grinned. "It's a X-Wing. You like Star Wars?" She nodded, and his face lit up. "You can stay. You seem nice." Daniel cleared his throat, motioning her inside. The living room was small, with a worn couch, a coffee table covered in Liam's drawings, and a faint smell of motor oil and coffee. "The room's upstairs," Daniel said, leading her up a narrow staircase that creaked underfoot. The attic room was modest, bare wooden walls, a single window overlooking Cedar Lane, a twin bed with faded sheets and a small desk. To most students, it might have seemed too plain, too small. To Sarah, it felt like a sanctuary. She set her suitcase down, her fingers lingering on the handle. "Rent's due end of the month," Daniel said, standing in the doorway, his tone careful but fair. "Utilities are included. If you need anything, just knock. Liam and I are downstairs." Sarah met his gaze, her voice steady. "Thank you, Daniel. This will work." She didn't tell him she could have bought the entire street with a single call to her father's accountant. She didn't tell him she was running from a life where every choice was scrutinized. For the first time, Sarah felt the weight of her old life lift, even if just for a moment. Daniel Harper wasn't a man who trusted easily. Life had taught him to be cautious. 5 years ago, his wife Emily had died of cancer, leaving him to raise Liam alone. He worked long hours at Maplewood Auto Repair, his hands stained with grease. His paycheck stretched thin between rent, groceries, and Liam's school supplies. The house, though small, was filled with memories. Emily's laughter, Liam's first steps. The quiet nights when grief kept Daniel awake. Renting out the attic wasn't his first choice. It was his only one. The medical bills from Emily's illness lingered, and the shop's business was slowing. He'd written the notice with a heavy heart, hoping for a quiet tenant who wouldn't disrupt their lives. Sarah, with her polite manners and unassuming clothes, seemed like she might fit the bill. But there was something about her, her graceful posture, the way she spoke with a clarity that didn't match her worn sneakers, that made him wonder. He pushed the thought aside. She was a student, nothing more. That first evening, Sarah unpacked her suitcase in the attic, her few belongings looking out of place in the sparse room. A laptop, carefully chosen to look ordinary, a few books, and a single photo of her mother, tucked into a plain frame. Downstairs, she could hear Liam's chatter and Daniel's low, patient replies. The sounds were foreign, yet comforting, so different from the sterile silence of her father's mansion. She sat on the bed, the springs creaking, and stared out the window at the darkening street. Cedar Lane was alive with small details, a neighbor watering her garden, kids riding bikes, the distant hum of the ocean. It was real, unpolished, and exactly what she'd been searching for. The next morning, Sarah woke to the smell of toast and the clatter of dishes. She hesitated, then followed the sounds to the kitchen. Liam sat at a small table, swinging his legs, a plate of toast and scrambled eggs in front of him. Daniel stood at the stove, his back to her, flipping eggs in a dented pan. "Morning," Sarah said softly, lingering in the doorway. Liam looked up, his mouth full. "Hi, Sarah. Want some eggs?" Daniel glanced over his shoulder, his expression neutral. "You don't have to come down, you know. The attic has a kitchenette." Sarah smiled, stepping closer. "I know, but it smells good down here." Liam grinned, pointing at his plate. "Dad makes the best eggs." "Right, Dad." Daniel's lips twitched again, almost a smile. "Eat your breakfast, kid." Sarah hesitated, then said, "Can I help with anything?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You're a tenant, not a chef." But Liam piped up. "Can she help me with my science project? It's about planets, and I'm stuck." Sarah crouched beside him. "Planets, huh? I used to love astronomy. What's the project?" Liam's eyes lit up as he launched into a rambling explanation about Jupiter's moons. Sarah listened, nodding her heart, warming at his enthusiasm. Over the next few days, a rhythm began to form. Sarah attended classes in the mornings, her backpack slung over one shoulder, blending in with the other students. In the afternoons, she returned to Cedar Lane, often finding Liam in the front yard, tinkering with his bike or drawing spaceships. She'd sit with him, helping with homework or listening to his stories about school. Daniel, when he wasn't at the shop, watched from a distance, his quiet presence a steady anchor. Sarah noticed the small details of their life, the way Daniel reused coffee grounds to save money, the patched knees on Liam's jeans, the way he tucked a blanket over Liam when he fell asleep on the couch. It was a world so different from her own, yet it felt more like home than anything she'd known. One evening, as Sarah helped Liam glue planets to a poster board, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message, "Dad, where are you? Call me." She silenced it quickly, her fingers trembling. Liam looked up curious. "Who was that?" Sarah forced a smile. "Just a friend, nothing important." But her heart raced. She'd left Seattle without telling her father where she was going, only a vague note about needing space. Edward Bennett wasn't a man who accepted vague. She knew he'd find her eventually, but for now, she wanted to hold on to this life, a life where she was just Sarah, not a billionaire's daughter. As the sun set over Maplewood, casting long shadows across Cedar Lane, Sarah stood on the porch, watching the town settle into evening. Daniel joined her, leaning against the railing, his hands in his pockets. "You settling in okay?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded. "Better than I expected." He studied her for a moment, his eyes searching. "Most students don't pick a place like this. Too far from campus, too quiet." Sarah's smile was faint, almost secretive. "Maybe I like quiet." Daniel nodded, accepting her answer, though his curiosity lingered. Inside, Liam called out, "Sarah, come see my Jupiter. It's awesome." She laughed, heading back inside, leaving Daniel to watch the stars emerge over the Pacific. Neither of them knew it, but the simple act of Sarah answering that notice had set something in motion, something that would change their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The early September light filtered through the cedar trees lining Cedar Lane, casting dappled shadows across the Harper house. Inside, the small kitchen was alive with the clatter of dishes and Liam's chatter, his voice bouncing off the walls as he recounted a school story about a dodgeball game gone wrong. Sarah Bennett sat at the table, her textbook open but forgotten, listening with a smile as Liam waved his fork for emphasis. Daniel Harper, scrubbing a pen at the sink, glanced over his shoulder, his tired blue eyes softening at the sight. It had been 2 weeks since Sarah moved into the attic, and already the house felt different, warmer somehow despite its creaking floors and chipped paint. Sarah, with her quiet laughter and patient way with Liam, had slipped into their lives like a missing piece they hadn't known they needed. But Daniel wasn't a fool. Something about her didn't add up. Her clothes were plain, but her manners were polished. Her speech too precise for a typical college student scraping by. He pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to his own wariness. Life had taught him to question kindness, especially when it came too easily. Sarah, for her part, was careful. She'd learned to blend in at Maplewood Community College, keeping her head down in class and avoiding the sleek phone her father had given her. She used an older model, scuffed and unassuming, to text her classmates or check emails. But the weight of her secret, the fact that she was Sarah Bennett, daughter of Edward Bennett, tech billionaire, pressed against her every time she caught Daniel's curious glance or Liam's trusting grin. She wanted this life, this simplicity, but she knew it was fragile, built on half-truths. Still, the Harper house, with its mismatched furniture and Liam's spaceship drawings taped to the fridge, felt more like home than her father's Seattle mansion ever had. That morning, as Sarah helped Liam pack his backpack, he tugged at her sleeve. "Sarah, can you teach me to ride a bike? Dad's always too busy at the shop." His green eyes were wide, hopeful. Sarah hesitated, glancing at Daniel, who was pouring coffee into a thermos, his movements automatic after years of early shifts at Maplewood Auto Repair. "I'm not too busy," Daniel said, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. "Just work's been tight." Sarah smiled softly. "I'd love to help Liam." Maybe after school, Liam's face lit up, and he high-fived her before darting out the door to catch the school bus. Daniel watched his expression unreadable. "You don't have to do that," he said quietly. "He's not your responsibility." Sarah met his gaze, her voice steady. "I know, but I want to." Daniel nodded, grabbing his keys and heading out, leaving Sarah to wonder if he trusted her or was just too tired to argue. That afternoon, Sarah met Liam in the front yard, where his rusty bike leaned against a tree. The air smelled of salt from the nearby Pacific, and seagulls wheeled overhead. Liam, in a too-big helmet, wobbled as Sarah held the bike steady, her hands gentle but firm. "Keep pedaling, Liam. You've got this," she called, jogging alongside him as he teetered down the gravel path. After a few shaky attempts, he found his balance, letting out a triumphant whoop as he rode a wobbly circle around the yard. Sarah clapped her laughter, mingling with his. From the porch, Daniel watched unnoticed, having come home early. His chest tightened at the sight, Liam's joy, Sarah's patience. It had been years since he'd seen Liam laugh like that, not since Emily was alive. He turned away the memory of his late wife, sharp and unyielding. Over the next few days, Sarah became a fixture in the Harper routine. She joined them for dinner most nights, despite the kitchenette in her attic room. Daniel cooked simple meals, spaghetti, grilled cheese, whatever was on sale at the market, and Sarah chipped in chopping vegetables or setting the table. Liam, ever talkative, filled the silences with stories about school or questions about Sarah's classes. "Do you like college?" he asked one evening, twirling spaghetti on his fork. Sarah smiled, dodging the deeper truth. "It's okay. I like learning new things." Liam grinned. "You're smart, like my mom was." Daniel's fork paused midair, but he said nothing, his jaw tight. Sarah noticed her heart aching for the grief he carried so quietly. Sarah's kindness extended beyond the dinner table. One morning, she noticed Daniel's old pickup truck wouldn't start its engine, coughing pitifully in the driveway. Daniel cursed under his breath. Checking his watch, he was already late for the shop. "I'll figure it out tonight," he muttered, grabbing his bike instead. Sarah waited until he was gone, then called a local mechanic, paying for the repair with her own card and asking them to bill it as a shop discount. When Daniel came home to a running truck, he frowned, suspicious. "This cost more than a discount," he said, eyeing Sarah. She shrugged, her smile disarming. "The guy owed me a favor from class." Daniel didn't buy it, but Liam's excitement about the fixed truck distracted him from pressing further. Sarah's generosity didn't stop there. She noticed Liam's pencils were stubs, his notebooks tattered. One day, she slipped a pack of art supplies, colored pencils, a sketchbook into his backpack, claiming they were extras from a campus giveaway. Liam's eyes lit up as he drew a spaceship that evening, showing it to Sarah with pride. "You're the best, Sarah," he said, hugging her. Daniel, watching from the doorway, felt a mix of gratitude and unease. He couldn't afford such things, not with the shop's hours cut and bills piling up. Sarah's gifts, however small, felt like a reminder of what he couldn't provide. Maplewood wasn't immune to hardship either. News spread that the local fish processing plant, a major employer, was closing, threatening jobs for dozens of families, including some of Daniel's co-workers. The town buzzed with worry, and Sarah overheard students at college discussing a community meeting to organize support. She showed up blending in with her hoodie and jeans and volunteered to help distribute food donations. Her resourcefulness, organizing schedules, contacting local businesses, caught the eye of the organizers who assumed she was just a dedicated student. Daniel, attending the same meeting, saw her there, her sleeves rolled up as she sorted canned goods. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, his tone neutral, but curious. Sarah smiled. "I want to help." He nodded, something like respect flickering in his eyes. One evening, as Sarah helped Liam with his math homework, a close call nearly unraveled her secret. Liam, rummaging through her bag for a pencil, pulled out her designer wallet, a sleek leather piece her father had insisted she keep. "Whoa, this is fancy," Liam said, his eyes wide. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She snatched it back, laughing to cover her panic. "Just a gift from a friend," she said, tucking it away. "Hey, tell me about that spaceship you're drawing." Liam, easily distracted, launched into a story, but Sarah's hands trembled as she closed her bag. She knew she couldn't keep her past hidden forever. The tension came to a head one night after Liam went to bed. Daniel found Sarah in the kitchen washing dishes, her movements slow, almost thoughtful. He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "Sarah, I need to ask you something," he said, his voice low but firm. "You're not like the other students. The truck, the art supplies, even the way you talk, it doesn't add up." Sarah froze, the sponge still in her hand. She turned to face him, her hazel eyes meeting his. "I'm just a student, Daniel," she said, but her voice wavered. He shook his head. "You're paying for things I can't. I need to know why." Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him about her father's wealth, the mansion she'd fled, the life she didn't want, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she said, "I just want to help. Okay, you and Liam. You've been kind to me." Daniel studied her for a long moment, his jaw tight. "Kindness doesn't pay for truck repairs," he said quietly, but he didn't press further. He turned and left the kitchen, leaving Sarah with the weight of her unspoken truth. As she climbed the stairs to her attic room, Sarah's heart raced. She sat on the bed staring at the photo of her mother on the desk, a woman who'd once told her that happiness wasn't found in money. Outside, the Pacific roared faintly, a reminder of Maplewood's quiet resilience. Sarah knew her time here was borrowed, that her father's world would eventually find her. But for now, she held on to the warmth of the Harper house, the creak of the stairs, Liam's laughter, even Daniel's cautious trust. She wasn't ready to let it go, not yet. Downstairs, Daniel sat on the couch staring at Liam's drawings. He didn't understand Sarah, not fully, but he couldn't deny the light she'd brought into their lives. As the town's struggles loomed and Sarah's secrets simmered, the fragile bond they'd built was about to be tested in ways neither could foresee. The October air in Maplewood, Oregon, carried a chill from the Pacific, sweeping through Cedar Lane and rattling the loose shutters of the Harper house. Inside, the small living room glowed with the soft light of a lamp, casting shadows over Liam's scattered spaceship drawings and Sarah Bennett's open textbook on the couch. Sarah, now a fixture in the Harper household, sat cross-legged on the floor, helping Liam with a model rocket for his science fair. Her laughter mingled with his excited chatter, filling the space with a warmth Daniel Harper hadn't felt in years. Daniel, leaning against the kitchen doorway, watched them, his calloused hands stuffed in his pockets. For a moment, he let himself forget the weight of the world, the looming layoffs at the fish processing plant, the bills stacked on his desk, the questions about Sarah that still lingered. She'd been with them for over a month, her presence a quiet anchor, but her unexplained generosity and polished demeanor kept his suspicions alive. He wanted to trust her, but trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Sarah felt the weight of Daniel's gaze, but kept her focus on Liam, guiding his small hands to glue a fin to the rocket. She'd grown adept at dodging questions, deflecting Liam's curiosity about her fancy wallet, or Daniel's pointed looks when she slipped new sneakers into Liam's closet, claiming they were hand-me-downs. Her secret that she was Sarah Bennett, daughter of tech billionaire Edward Bennett, felt heavier with each passing day. She loved this life, the creaking floors, the smell of Daniel's burnt toast, Liam's endless questions about stars. But she knew her father, a man who controlled boardrooms and bent cities to his will, wouldn't let her vanish forever. She'd ignored his calls, silenced his texts, but the knot in her stomach told her time was running out. That afternoon, as Sarah walked back from Maplewood Community College, the sky darkened heavy with the promise of a storm. The town was already on edge. The plant closure had left families scrambling, and the community center, a hub for meetings and kids' activities, was struggling to keep up with demand for aid. Sarah had thrown herself into volunteering, organizing food drives, and coordinating with local shops. Her knack for logistics, honed by years of observing her father's empire, surprised the other volunteers who saw her as a dedicated student, not a billionaire's daughter. As she turned onto Cedar Lane, her phone buzzed again. "Dad, I know you're in Maplewood. We need to talk." Her heart sank. She shoved the phone into her pocket, quickening her pace toward the Harper house, where Liam's bike lay tipped over in the yard, a reminder of the life she wasn't ready to lose. Inside, Liam was sprawled on the couch, sketching a comet. "Sarah, can you help me make it look fiery?" he called, waving his pencil. She smiled, dropping her backpack. "Sure thing, astronaut." Daniel emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a rag. "Storm's coming," he said, glancing out the window. "Shop's closing early. You okay, walking in this?" Sarah nodded. "I'm fine. Used to Seattle rain." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly, another hint of her past slipping through, but he let it go. Before Sarah could join Liam, a low rumble of thunder rolled in, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel. She froze her breath, catching as she peered through the window. A black SUV, sleek and out of place, idled outside. Its tinted windows and polished chrome screamed wealth, a stark contrast to the modest homes of Cedar Lane. Sarah's stomach churned. She knew that car. The doorbell rang sharp and insistent. Daniel frowned, crossing to the door. "Who'd come out in this weather?" he muttered, opening it. A tall man in a tailored suit stood on the porch, his silver hair untouched by the drizzle, his presence commanding, despite the storm. Edward Bennett's sharp eyes scanned the room, landing on Sarah. "Sarah," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Enough of this. It's time to come home." Liam looked up, confused, clutching his sketchbook. Daniel stepped forward, his posture tense. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low but firm. Edward's gaze flicked to him, then back to Sarah. "I'm her father, and she doesn't belong here." Sarah's heart pounded as she stepped between them. "Dad, please," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "This is my home now." Edward's jaw tightened, his eyes sweeping the room, the worn couch, the cluttered table. the faint smell of motor oil. This, he said, disbelief dripping from the word. You're living in this place when you have everything waiting in Seattle. Liam's small voice broke the tension. Sarah's not going, is she? He scrambled to her side, grabbing her hand. Sarah knelt, forcing a smile. I'm right here, Liam. But her eyes locked with her father's, a silent battle brewing. Daniel's mind raced. Father. The pieces clicked, Sarah's polished speech, her unexplained generosity, the way she carried herself like she'd walked through ballrooms, not repair shops. You're not a student scraping by, he said, his voice low, almost betrayed. Sarah's throat tightened. I am a student, she said, standing. But, yes, my father's Edward Bennett. The name hung heavy. Even in Maplewood, people knew of Bennett Tech, the empire behind half the apps on their phones. Daniel staggered back, his hand running through his hair. You're a billionaire's daughter living in my attic. Edward stepped forward, his tone authoritative. Exactly. This charade ends now, Sarah. Pack your things. The room fell silent, save for the patter of rain against the windows. Sarah's eyes burned with tears, but her voice was firm. No, Dad. I'm not leaving. Not yet. Edward's face darkened. You're throwing away your future for what, a run-down house and strangers? Daniel bristled, stepping closer. We're not strangers. Sarah's been safe here, respected. Can you say the same for your world? Edward's eyes narrowed, but before he could retort, a crack of thunder shook the house, followed by a deafening crash. The lights flickered. Liam yelped, clinging to Sarah. What was that? He whispered. Daniel rushed to the window, Sarah and Edward following. Across town, a plume of smoke rose from the direction of the community center. A neighbor's voice shouted from the street. Tree fell on the center roofs, caved in. The storm, fiercer than predicted, had struck Maplewood hard. Sarah's phone buzzed with alerts from the volunteer group. Families were stranded, the center's supplies ruined. Without thinking, she grabbed her jacket. I'm going to help, she said, her voice steady, despite the chaos. Edward grabbed her arm. Sarah, this isn't your problem. She pulled free, her eyes fierce. It is. These people matter to me. Daniel, already pulling on his boots, nodded at her. I'm coming too. Liam, stay with Mrs. Carter next door. Liam hesitated, then hugged Sarah tightly. Don't go away, okay? She kissed his forehead. I won't. The community center was a mess. Shattered windows, a collapsed roof, volunteers scrambling to salvage supplies in the rain. Sarah took charge, her voice cutting through the chaos as she directed people to move food crates to a nearby church. She called a contact from her father's network, a logistics manager who owed her a favor securing emergency tents and blankets within hours. Daniel, hauling debris alongside neighbors, watched her, his earlier anger fading. She wasn't just a rich girl playing house. She was capable, selfless. Edward, standing under an umbrella, observed in silence, his expression unreadable. By dawn, the rain had slowed, and the center's supplies were safe. Sarah, soaked and exhausted, stood with Daniel as volunteers thanked her. You didn't have to do this, Daniel said quietly. Sarah met his gaze. I wanted to. Edward approached his suit, damp, his voice softer. Sarah, I don't understand why you're here, but I see you're needed. He turned to Daniel. You've given her something I couldn't, but she's still my daughter. Daniel nodded, his pride warring with gratitude. She's been good for us too. Sarah's heart ached at the words, but Liam's plea echoed in her mind. Don't go, Edward sighed, his shoulders slumping. Stay for now, but we're not done talking. He returned to his SUV, leaving Sarah and Daniel in the quiet aftermath. Neighbors whispered, piecing together Sarah's identity, but she didn't care. She looked at Daniel, his face softened by exhaustion, and something else. Respect, maybe trust. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," she said. He shook his head. "You're here. That's enough for now." As they walked back to Cedar Lane, Liam ran out to meet them, his relief palpable. Sarah hugged him, her secret no longer a wall between them. The storm had exposed her truth, but it had also shown her where she belonged, at least for now. The Harper house, with its creaks and warmth, was still her haven, but the cracks in her carefully built facade were starting to show. The November breeze swept through Maplewood, Oregon, carrying the scent of damp leaves and the faint tang of the Pacific. Cedar Lane was quiet. The Harper house standing steady despite its peeling paint and sagging porch. Inside, the small kitchen glowed with the warmth of a flickering bulb, the table cluttered with Liam's colored pencils and Sarah Bennett's open laptop, where she was drafting flyers for a fundraiser to rebuild the community center. Sarah, now 3 months into her life as the Harpers' tenant, had become more than a guest. Her laughter mingled with Liam's as they debated whether his latest spaceship drawing needed more flames, while Daniel Harper, stirring a pot of chili, stole glances at them, his tired blue eyes softer than they'd been in years. The storm that had exposed Sarah's identity as the daughter of tech billionaire Edward Bennett had shaken the fragile balance of their lives. But it hadn't broken it. Instead, it had woven them closer. Though questions lingered, how long could Sarah stay? And what did this unconventional family mean for all of them? Sarah balanced college and her role in the Harper household with a rhythm that felt natural. Mornings were spent in lecture halls, her backpack slung over one shoulder, blending in with classmates who still whispered about the rich girl who'd organized storm relief. Afternoons found her back at Cedar Lane, helping Liam with homework or joining neighbors to plan the fundraiser. The community center, its roof still patched with tarps, was more than a building. It was Maplewood's heart, a place where kids like Liam played and families found support after the plant closure. Sarah's idea for a fundraiser, a winter fair with games, food stalls, and a raffle, had sparked excitement in the town. She'd used her father's contacts discreetly, securing donations from Portland businesses, but passed them off as community outreach programs to avoid suspicion. Her knack for organization, honed by years of watching her father's empire, made her indispensable, though she never sought the spotlight. Daniel, meanwhile, was grappling with his own changes. The shop's hours were still cut, and the threat of layoffs loomed, but Sarah's presence had eased the strain. Her quiet acts of kindness, groceries that appeared in the pantry, a new jacket for Liam from a campus sale, had softened the edges of his pride. One evening, as Sarah and Liam sorted raffle prizes in the living room, Daniel sat on the couch, his hands clasped. He'd been carrying a weight since Emily's death, a grief he'd buried under work and fatherhood. Watching Sarah braid Liam's messy hair, laughing as he protested, stirred something he hadn't felt in years, hope maybe, or the faint possibility of letting someone in. He cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, "you've done a lot for us. For the town, too." She looked up, surprised. It's nothing, she said, but her smile was shy. Daniel shook his head. "It's not nothing. Liam hasn't been this happy since—" He trailed off the words, catching. Sarah's eyes softened. "I'm glad I'm here," she said simply, and for once, Daniel didn't question her. The fundraiser took shape over weeks, transforming the church lot into a bustling fairground. Sarah coordinated volunteers, her clipboard a constant companion, while Liam ran around testing carnival games. Daniel roped into manning a hot cocoa stand, watched her work. marveling at her ability to rally people. The night of the fair, Maplewood came alive, strings of lights twinkled, kids laughed, and the smell of popcorn filled the air. Sarah, in a borrowed scarf and jeans, handed out raffle tickets, her laughter bright as she teased Liam about his cotton candy mustache. Daniel, pouring cocoa, caught her eye across the crowd. For a moment, the world narrowed to just them, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they'd built. Then Liam tugged at Sarah's sleeve, dragging her to a ring toss game, and the moment passed. The fair raised enough to start rebuilding the community center, and Maplewood's gratitude was palpable. Neighbors thanked Sarah, some still whispering about her billionaire father, but she brushed it off, focusing on Liam's excitement as he won a stuffed astronaut. Later, as they cleaned up, Daniel approached her. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, his voice gruff. Sarah smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I wanted to. This town, you and Liam, you've given me something I never had." Daniel frowned, curious. "What's that?" Sarah hesitated, then said, "A place where I'm just me." Her words hung between them, heavy with truth. Daniel nodded, his throat tight. He didn't know her whole story, but he knew she'd changed their lives. A week later, Edward Bennett returned to Maplewood. His SUV pulled up to Cedar Lane, less imposing, this time his suit jacket slung over his arm. Sarah, expecting another confrontation, braced herself as she opened the door. But Edward's face was different, tired, not commanding. "Sarah," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard, "I've been thinking about what you said, about belonging." He glanced at Daniel, who stood in the doorway, and Liam clutching his astronaut toy. "I don't understand this life, but I see it makes you happy." Sarah's eyes widened. "You mean I can stay?" Edward nodded slowly. "If this is what you want. But I want to help." He turned to Daniel. "Your son Liam, he deserves opportunities. Let me fund his education, a trust for his future." Daniel's jaw tightened, pride flaring. "We manage," he said curtly. Edward held up a hand. "Not charity. A thank you for giving my daughter something I couldn't." Daniel hesitated, glancing at Liam, who was watching with wide eyes. Sarah touched his arm gently. "It's for Liam," she said. Daniel exhaled, his shoulders slumping. "All right, for him." Liam ran to Sarah, hugging her. "You're staying forever, right?" he asked, his voice small. Sarah laughed, ruffling his hair. "As long as you'll have me." Edward watched his expression softening. He saw his daughter not as the heiress he'd raised, but as a young woman who'd found her place. He nodded at Daniel. "You're a good man, Harper. She's lucky to have you both." Daniel met his gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. Winter settled over Maplewood, and the community center's reconstruction began its new roof, a symbol of resilience. Sarah continued her classes, her attic room now filled with photos of her and Liam at the fair, a scarf Daniel had lent her draped over the chair. One evening, as snow dusted Cedar Lane, the three sat down to dinner, chili Liam's favorite. Sarah caught Daniel's eye, and the silence held a warmth that needed no words. Liam, oblivious, chattered about his science fair ribbon. "This is like forever, right?" he said, grinning. Sarah's throat tightened, but she smiled. "Maybe forever starts with nights like this." Daniel chuckled, his guard down for the first time in years. "You're stuck with us, kid." Later, as Sarah cleared the table, Edward's words echoed in her mind. He'd stood outside the house before leaving, watching the glow of their dinner through the window. "You were right," he'd whispered to himself. "This is home." Sarah, glancing out at the snowy street, felt the truth settle in her bones. She'd come to Maplewood seeking escape, but she'd found something richer. Connection, purpose, a family not bound by blood, but by choice. The lesson wasn't lost on her, nor on Maplewood. The town, battered by storms and economic hardship, had rallied together, proving that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the hands that lifted each other up. Sarah, once defined by her father's fortune, had learned that authenticity, being seen for who she was, not what she owned, was the truest currency. For Daniel, it was a reminder that pride, while noble, could open to trust without breaking. And for Liam, it was the simple joy of a family made whole, not by money, but by love. As the three of them laughed over a board game, the Harper house creaked around them, a testament to resilience and the power of belonging. The lesson was clear, true. Wealth lies in the connections we forge, the communities we build, and the courage to live authentically, no matter the cost.